The spring session in South Bend is in the books. We've got Brian Driscoll on the line from Irish Breakdown to help us break it down as we look toward August camp at Notre Dame. Brian, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Busy week, busy weekend, but I'm doing very well.
Good to have you here to talk Irish. And, of course, the quarterback situation is front and center in regards to the evaluation. I thought it was fairly interesting that Brian Kelly had announced earlier in the week that Tyler Buchner would be live. So he would be the guy based on Kelly's just evaluation of him not being able to see the field during the 2020 season because of the pandemic and not being able to play live football for quite some time, that he wanted to see him under those circumstances. And that's very uncommon these days. And, of course, Jack Cohn and Drew Pine took most of the reps early in the game. So your thoughts about the quarterback situation?
I was actually pleasantly surprised with the quarterback situation. I thought Jack Cohn played well, especially when you consider this was really only his 15th practices with these players and in this system. I thought he showed great anticipation, made some good reads. We did a video yesterday where we showed some clips of him. I mean, the ball, he's cocked and the ball's coming out as guys are hitting the top end of their route. We just didn't see that the last few years at Notre Dame. And he's already doing that. We saw Tyler Buchner even doing that. And what that tells me is obviously Coach Reese is working on that a lot, but it also shows me these are guys that have really good anticipatory skills, which is so important for quarterback, and especially for a guy like Jack Cohn who, doesn't have that monster arm that you can kind of overcome the ball not coming out on time. He's got to be precise and accurate and get the ball out. And outside of one mistake, throwing a pick, and then he missed one deep shot he should have hit, I thought he played well. And I think Brian Kelly's comments regarding Tyler Buchner have to be a great sign for Notre Dame fans, because one of my big concerns with Tyler Buchner was not only did he not play the 2020 season, he didn't play the 2018 season. He got hurt in the first game of the year. He tore his knee up in the first game of the year as a sophomore, missed that entire season, then dominated as a junior, and then play as a senior. So he hasn't played a lot of football, period. And so to hear that tells me that, A, he's having a really good spring. He had changed his arm, has changed his throwing motion while working with quarterback coaches in the offseason. And when we saw him at the Elite 11 last year, he wasn't spinning it the way that he did as a dominant high school player. That's now back to normal. So the fact that they're talking about we need to get him reps, we need to get him live reps, tells me that he's a lot more engaged in this battle than maybe we thought. And the dream scenario that I've been talking about for a while, Mark, is Jack Cohn or Drew Pine wins that job. And I think Jack Cohn, because it's very close talent-wise, but Jack Cohn's got the experience. But then Tyler Buchner plays so well that you just say, hey, we have to find some kind of role for him. And being an athletic player that rushed for over 1,600 yards and 28 touchdowns as a junior in high school and threw for over 4,000 yards, he brings a complementary skill set that you could say, hey, maybe he's the short yardage quarterback or the red zone quarterback, or, you throw him in every now and then, sort of like we've seen with what Clemson did with Trevor Lawrence early in 2018, where he'd come in and as sort of a rotation with Kelly Bryant, or going all the way back to Tim Tebow back in, 2006, right? When he was, he wasn't coming in to replace Chris Leak, but they found a role for him. He's just too good not to play. And if Tyler Buchner can force himself onto the field like that, it says a lot, not just about the present 2021, but it says even more about the future of the quarterback position at Notre Dame.
Brian Driscoll does some amazing work there at Irish Breakdown. So check out his work. Again, just search it right here on YouTube, Irish Breakdown. And please like the video, share the videos out on social media, and subscribe right here. We talk college football each and every day. All right. Anybody who watched the NFL draft could make the assumption that the defense for the current 21 edition would be way ahead of the offense, because most of the offense came off the board in that NFL draft along the offensive front. 80% of those guys gone. Of course, Ian Book as well. So was it the case of the defense having the better of the offense during the spring game?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, the offense made their fair share of plays. Avery Davis had a really good game, a receiver. Lawrence Keys had over 100 yards receiving. But for the most part, the defense, especially the front seven, really dominated action. And Mark, you've been following football for a long time. Defense is normally ahead of the offense now. They're normally ahead of the offense really through the first couple weeks of fall camp. But when you consider how much the offense lost, not only the 4 offensive linemen that they lost, 3 got drafted, 1 signed with the Lions as an undrafted free agent, but their best returner, their only returning starter, has been out all spring with an injury that he suffered during the fall. So you got 5 new offensive linemen, 2 true freshmen in the starting lineup right now. Yeah, and then Notre Dame returns almost, all but 2 players from their defensive line. The defense is definitely ahead of schedule right now.
So when you look at the offensive line, do you feel comfortable with what's coming back? Of course, the experience factor is gone, but I got to think that those guys are just as highly touted as the guys they've replaced.
Oh, certainly. I mean, look, the issue at offensive line is not going to be talent, Mark. I mean, anyone that says, well, they've got to replace this talented player, that talented player. It's not like they lost Quentin Nelson. I mean, Liam Eichenberg is a heck of a player. Robert Hainsey was a heck of a player. Aaron Banks, a heck of a player. 2nd and 3rd round picks. But there's them, and then there's Quentin Nelson, right? There's Ronnie Stanley. They're not that level of player. And the guys that are replacing him, Blake Fisher's a freshman, but he was a 5-star recruit. Andrew Kristofic was a top 200 recruit. Quinn Carroll was a top 100 recruit. Zeke Correll was a top 100 recruit. Josh Lugg was a top 150 caliber recruit. There's talent there. There's 4 guys coming back that have started at least 1 game in their career, so there is also a blend of experience. So no one's going to be able to say, well, they just didn't have the players this year. It's about whether or not Jeff Quinn, the offensive line coach, can get this group on the same page, which requires first, figure out who's going to play where. And then number 2, make sure that the communication improves. Because that's been the biggest thing, is just not handling the twist. We saw a lot of, end tackle or tackle end stunts that we saw yesterday. Just basic, like day 1 install stunts that the offensive line wasn't picking up. That's problematic. Those are the things that have to get fixed. If the line struggles this year, it's going to be a combination of experience and then just not having those guys mentally ready. It's not going to be about a lack of size or a lack of talent.
The Irish, coming off 2 playoff appearances in the past 3 years, hope to get back this fall, although some see it as a transitional year, minus the offensive line starters, Ian Book, as well as a few skill position players on the outside, and Tommy Tremble at tight end in particular. We got Brian Driscoll on the line from Irish Breakdown. And again, you hear the insight, the information, and the wealth of knowledge with him right here. So check out the full array on Irish Breakdown. All right. When you look at the various storylines that came out of spring camp, not just the spring game itself, but tie that all together, how do you feel about this football team today versus your thoughts a month ago?
I feel better about this offense, this football team, than I did a month ago, mainly because I feel better about the offense than I did a month ago. I think when you look at a guy like Lawrence Keys, who's always had the talent, it's just about him putting it all together and then getting that opportunity. He had a great spring from all reports. We saw him show up in those little 3-minute video clips that we would get of each practice. But then, you do some digging and you talk to sources and everybody says, he had a great spring. Braden Lindsey was healthy. You look at guys that Notre Dame lost. Part of the reason that Javon McKinley and Ben Skoranek played the kind of snaps they did last year is because Braden Lindsey was hurt all year. Kevin Austin was hurt all year. Lawrence Keys had 2 different sicknesses and illnesses and injuries he had to deal with. So you had a lot of guys banged up last year. You weren't 100% healthy. Now those guys are back. You have a different type of athlete. So it's gone as the 6'3", 220 back shoulder, move the chain power forwards that Notre Dame put at receiver. And now you've got Avery Davis, who's 5'11", 190, or 200 pounds. You've got Lawrence Keys, who's 5'11", 170. Braden Lindsey, 6 foot, 175. Those guys can all run. So there's a different type of athlete there that you start saying, okay, there's some guys that can make plays. Is Kevin Austin going to be healthy? That's, to me, a big question mark. Chris Tyree had a big spring. They're using him and Kyron Williams in the backfield together more. So we're just seeing a completely different look. And to me, those are all steps. We've seen RPOs, all types. We saw move in the pocket. We saw some really interesting concepts, nice mesh between some horizontal stretch concepts, vertical stretch concepts. There just was a lot of different look to it. And to me, that's what's missing at Notre Dame. Defensively, they've been good enough to compete for championships the last 3 seasons. They held Alabama to their season low in scoring. They held Clemson to over 2 touchdowns below their scoring average back in 2018. It's, can the offense compete? And so far, the offense has been light years behind those other top programs. And these are steps to getting the offense going in that direction. And we didn't see Michael Mayer yesterday, who's arguably Notre Dame's best player. Him and Kyle Hamilton are in that competition for who's their best player, and neither of them played in the spring game yesterday.
Yeah, you mentioned Mayer and Austin missing the game. I counted 15 names that missed yesterday's game. Are any of those guys a concern long-term? From a none that
are going to be where we were expecting to be playmakers. There's a couple guys that you say, I don't know if this guy's going to be able to keep playing football, but they were second, third teamers. When you look at Kyle Hamilton, Jacob Lacey, Jarrett Patterson, Kevin Austin, the only guy of that group that to me is a bit of a red flag is Kevin Austin. And the reason I say that, Mark, is, foot injuries impact different athletes differently, right? An offensive lineman can break his foot and still be okay. A premium athlete, a corner, a receiver, that can be a more damaging injury, just like an Achilles can be more damaging to a skill player than it would be a big guy. And so we have to see whether or not Kevin Austin's going to be able to come back and get that burst back that he had before. So that is to me the only concern that I have of all the injured players. Kyle Hamilton could have played this spring if they were playing an actual season in the spring. Kyle Hamilton would have played. I mean, you'd see they'd send us these little 3-minute highlight videos after every practice, and there was a lot of defensive highlights. And after every one, you see Kyle Hamilton running on the field, jumping up and patting guys on the helmet. This was more about protecting him to make sure that an injury didn't get further damaged, knowing who he is, than it was about an injury that was concerning to about whether or not he's going to be full strength in the fall. So Austin's the only one of that group that you say, I'm a little skeptical. I need to see him do it. When you break your foot twice, that to me raises some concerns about, can you get back to that same level of explosiveness?
We appreciate the work from Brian Driscoll on Irish Breakdown. He's joined us a few times to talk Notre Dame football, and it's obvious that he's got a huge investment in this, knows his stuff. So head on over to Irish Breakdown. Brian, with the 9 selections, that's only one behind Alabama and Ohio State. They're pretty much at the top of the sport right now. It's ahead of Florida, Michigan, a whole bunch of others. LSU ties with Georgia. And even in implementing a point system to mirror not just the depth and the overall mass of the picks, but the quality of the picks, the 9 selected rank right there with Georgia within a point. So just speak to the quality of the brand right now and the status of the program in factoring this heavily into the draft.
Mark, this is Notre Dame's best opportunity in over 20 years to make that final jump. I mean, if you think about it, there is no negative momentum with Notre Dame right now, other than, you've had some bad losses, but a lot of teams would like to have a bad playoff loss because they've never been in the playoff. You've had a playoff appearance in 2 of the last 3 years. You're coming off of your best recruiting class in almost 7 years. And you just had your best recruiting class your draft class, your biggest draft class since 1994. And as you mentioned, it's not like a situation where like Penn State had 6 players picked. 3 of them went in round 7. Kentucky had 6 guys picked. I think 3 of them went in round 6 and 7. You're talking about Notre Dame had more day 2 picks than anybody in college football. I think they were tied with one other team for day 2 picks. Now they got shut out of the first round, which is the difference between, them and Georgia, for example. But you're producing high premium. So to me, premium draft picks are rounds 1 through 3. Notre Dame produced 5 of them. It was the second most that they've produced behind, I believe it was the 2014 draft class, which had like Zach Martin, Stephon Tuitt, Lewis Nix. You had some big time. I'm trying to think. Troy Nicholas was the second round pick in that draft class. So you're creating value. So everything is kind of going in the right direction for Notre Dame to finally say to those 2 or 3 recruits that could really turn the program around to say, hey, look, we're almost there. We're in the playoff 2 of the last 3 years. Look at the draft class we had. We can get you to the NFL. If you're talking to a 5-star quarterback, look what we did with Ian Book, 3-star recruit that we flipped from Washington State. He was a 4th-round pick. What could we do with you? That kind of thing. So, Adi Ogundeji was a 3-star recruit that they flipped from Western Michigan, didn't have any in-state offers. Look what we're doing with those guys. Imagine what we could do with you, 5-star recruit. And I think this is that opportunity for Notre Dame to really hammer that and build the roster up where they can really close the gap with those teams. They're closer than they've been, Mark. And since 93, this is the closest Notre Dame has been. Now they have to take advantage of this momentum and seal the deal with, 2, 3, 4 recruits a year that they're currently not getting.
Irish Breakdown, folks. It's great stuff. Even if you're not a Notre Dame fan, if you want to follow the best programs, and if you're a college football nerd, you head on over there and catch Brian's work right there. Brian, we always appreciate you stopping by. It's always awesome stuff.
Thanks for having me on.